Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Have you ever had the sense that, little by little, you lost your place in the hearts of the people you love most? If you're 50, 60, or older, you've probably experienced that silent pain that eats you from the inside. It's that feeling that after a lifetime dedicated to your children, you suddenly became a burden, a nuisance, someone who gets in the way of other people's plans. Today I'm going to share a story that will stir your feelings deeply. It's the story of Evelyn Mitchell, a 62-year-old woman who heard a devastating line from her own son Comfort. "You should have stayed married." That sentence wasn't just cruel, it was the spark for a transformation no one expected. Maybe you see yourself in Evelyn. Maybe you've also felt rejected, diminished, as if your life experience wasn't worth anything. But get ready, because this story will show that it's never too late to turn things around, to win back your dignity, and to show everyone who underestimated you what you're really capable of. What you're about to discover goes beyond a simple story of overcoming. You'll learn about justice, about the power of second chances, and about how sometimes we need to lose everything to find our true strength. This is a story about a woman who turned humiliation into power, rejection into independence. Evelyn lived in exile inside her own son's house. She slept on a worn-out couch, followed humiliating rules, and accepted crumbs of affection. But fate had other plans for her. One seemingly simple decision to buy a lottery ticket with her last dollars would change not only her life but also the lives of those who had looked down on her. This isn't just a story about sudden wealth. It's about dignity regained, about the moment a person decides to no longer accept being treated as less than they deserve. Get ready for an emotional journey that will make you reflect on your own family relationships. Imagine waking up every day on a couch that isn't yours, in a house that should be your refuge but became your exile. At 62, Evelyn Mitchell knew that reality better than anyone should. Divorce had hit her life like a hurricane, taking away not only the husband of 30 years but also her security, her home, and it seemed, her dignity. What remained was a reluctant invitation from her son Daniel: "You can stay on our couch until you get settled." 3 months passed, and that promise of something temporary had turned into a domestic prison where she was nothing more than an unwanted guest. The brown living room couch had become her entire world. That was where she kept her few clothes in an old suitcase hidden behind the furniture. That was where she pretended to watch TV when she was really just trying not to bother anyone. That was where she cried silently in the small hours, remembering when she had her own home, her own rules, her own life. Family rejection didn't come in shouting matches or open arguments that would almost have been easier to handle. It came in the awkward silence when she walked into the kitchen, in the whispers that stopped abruptly when she appeared. Daniel had changed so much since he married Rebecca. Evelyn remembered the affectionate boy who ran into her arms, who called her the best mom in the world, who promised to take care of her when he grew old. Now he could barely look her in the eye. Every conversation was tense, punctuated by uncomfortable silences and impatient sighs. Rebecca, for her part, had never been warm with Evelyn, but now she didn't even bother to hide her irritation. The house that was supposed to be a temporary home had become a silent battlefield. Mornings were especially cruel. Evelyn woke before everyone to fold her blankets and straighten the couch, trying to erase any evidence that she had slept there. Then she would stay in the kitchen, making coffee for the family as a desperate way to prove herself useful. But even that simple gesture seemed to bother Rebecca. "Mom, you don't need to do that," Daniel would say in a tone that sounded more like criticism than gratitude. The word mom came out of his mouth like an obligation, not a term of affection. The hard work of rebuilding a life after divorce felt impossible when you didn't even have a room to call your own. Evelyn had spent her entire life caring for the family, sacrificing her dreams for the dreams of others. Now, when she most needed support, she found that those for whom she had given up everything saw her as a burden. The nights were far too long, filled with painful reflections on how she had ended up there. The humiliation wasn't only in the circumstances but in how she had begun to accept that situation as normal. But fate, as she would soon discover, had other plans for Evelyn Mitchell. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to discover you still have the strength to swim back to the surface. Have you ever lived in a house where the rules weren't spoken, but you knew exactly what they were? Evelyn knew that feeling intimately and painfully. In her son Daniel's home, there was an unwritten code she learned the worst way possible through daily humiliation. The upstairs bathroom was forbidden territory. She could only use the small, cramped half-bath downstairs. The fridge had specific shelves where she could keep her few groceries, always on the bottom. The TV remote was another sacred object she couldn't touch when Rebecca or Daniel were home. The kitchen was a minefield of implicit restrictions. Evelyn discovered she couldn't use the espresso machine, only the old drip coffee maker kept in the tall cabinet. The nice dishes were out of reach. She was to use only the simplest ones. Rebecca had reorganized the entire kitchen after Evelyn arrived, creating a clear hierarchy of belongings. Every meal became a reminder that she didn't belong there, that her presence was tolerated, not welcomed. The coldness of those unspoken rules cut deeper than any cruel word. The most painful part was seeing how Daniel had embraced those rules without question. The son she had raised with so much love now treated her like a stranger who needed to be managed. When Evelyn tried to help with the cleaning, Daniel would quickly say, "No, Mom, Rebecca prefers to do it her way." Each refusal was another brick in the invisible wall separating Evelyn from her own family. She began to understand that her role there wasn't to be a mother or a mother-in-law, it was to be a silent presence that didn't interfere with the real life of the house. Family conversations happened as if she were invisible. Daniel and Rebecca discussed plans, shared news, cracked jokes, all while Evelyn was in the same room, as if she were a piece of furniture without feelings. When the phone rang and it was a relative or friend, they spoke naturally about their lives but never mentioned that Evelyn was there. The denial of her existence was so systematic that Evelyn began to doubt herself. The independence she lost in the divorce felt more and more like an impossible dream to win back. Weekends were especially cruel because the coldness became even more obvious. Daniel and Rebecca made plans to go out, to have friends over, to go to the movies, and Evelyn was never included. "We're going out for a bit," Daniel would announce, then look at Evelyn as if doing her a favor by letting her know she would be alone. The house grew quiet, and Evelyn found herself alone with her heavy thoughts. The humiliation peaked when Evelyn discovered they had installed a new lock on the pantry. Rebecca explained with a fake smile that it was to organize things better, but Evelyn understood the real message. The hard work of keeping family harmony fell entirely on Evelyn's shoulders. She had to swallow her anger, pretend not to notice the offenses, smile when she wanted to cry. But Evelyn still didn't know her greatest humiliation was yet to come, and that it would be exactly that moment that would awaken a strength she didn't even know she had. There are lines that stay burned into our memory forever, like invisible scars that hurt every time we recall them. For Evelyn Mitchell, that line came on a Tuesday morning while she was folding her blankets on the living room couch. Daniel came in from the kitchen with a cup of coffee in hand, and that look she had learned to fear, the face of someone about to say something unpleasant. "Mom, Rebecca and I have been talking," he began, and Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. "Have you thought about, have you looked into assisted living facilities in the area?" The question struck like lightning on a sunny day. Her own son was suggesting she go to a nursing home. Family rejection had found its cruelest expression in that seemingly caring suggestion. Daniel tried to soften it, explaining that it was just an idea, that they wanted what's best for her, that maybe she would be happier with people her own age. Every word was salt on an open wound. Rebecca appeared in the room at that moment, and Evelyn could tell by her expression that the conversation had been carefully planned. "There are some very nice places, Mom," Daniel continued, avoiding direct eye contact. The hypocrisy in his words was painful. What hurt most wasn't just the suggestion itself, but the way it was presented. Daniel spoke as if he were doing her a favor, as if this were a generous solution to a hard problem. There was no acknowledgement that she was his mother, that she had sacrificed her own dreams to raise him. Rebecca remained silent, but her satisfied smile said everything. The coldness of that moment revealed a devastating truth to Evelyn: she was no longer considered family. She was just a problem to be solved, an inconvenient situation that needed to be managed. The humiliation of that suggestion went beyond anything Evelyn had experienced so far. Daniel went on talking about the amenities and benefits of assisted living, as if he were selling a product. Evelyn listened in a state of shock, unable to believe this was the same boy who used to run into her arms when he had nightmares. The pain was physical, a pressure in her chest that made it hard even to breathe. She felt like she was witnessing the funeral of her own relevance in the family's life. Rebecca finally spoke, and her words were even sharper. "It's just that, you know how it is, Evelyn, with the baby coming, well, need the space." Baby? What baby? This was the first time Evelyn had heard about a pregnancy. They hadn't even shared the news with her, probably because they had already decided she wouldn't be around to meet her grandchild. The pregnancy reveal, which should have been a moment of family joy, was used as the final justification for her removal. The exile she had lived on the couch was about to become literal exile. Daniel tried to soften the situation by saying they would visit all the time, but Evelyn knew those empty promises too well. Yet in that moment of maximum pain, something began to awaken in Evelyn Mitchell. A quiet anger, a determination she hadn't felt in years. Fate had prepared a surprise that would turn that cruel suggestion into the biggest mistake Daniel and Rebecca would ever make. There are moments in life when reality hits with brutal force, exposing truths we'd rather not see. For Evelyn Mitchell, that moment came 3 days after the nursing home talk, when she overheard Daniel and Rebecca discussing plans for the baby's room. They were in the kitchen, talking excitedly about paint colors, furniture, and decor, when Rebecca said something that pierced Evelyn's heart like a sharp blade. "We'll finally be able to use the living room the way we wanted. When your mother leaves, well, put the crib there." Daniel laughed and agreed. "It'll look so much better. That couch always seemed out of place anyway." In that instant, Evelyn understood she wasn't just unwanted, she was seen as an obstacle to the family's happiness. The humiliation reached levels she never thought possible. Evelyn realized that during all those months on the couch, Daniel and Rebecca had just been waiting for her to get the hint and leave on her own. When that didn't happen, they had to be more direct with the nursing home suggestion. But what truly broke her was discovering they had already visited the place. Rebecca mentioned casually, "That place we went to see last week seemed perfect for her." They had researched, visited, and practically chosen where she would be deposited, all without consulting her. What hurt most was seeing how a baby not yet born already had more value and consideration than she did. The baby's room would be decorated with care, every detail chosen with love, while she, the one who had given birth to and raised Daniel, slept on a borrowed couch like a temporary intruder. The irony was cruel. She, who had spent years caring for Daniel when he was a baby, was now deemed less important than the physical space needed to accommodate the new family member. The conversation continued in the kitchen, and each word felt like a stab. Rebecca was thrilled about transforming the living room. "We can put a nursing chair here, a little bookshelf with children's books." Daniel agreed enthusiastically, describing how wonderful it would be to have a dedicated space for the baby on the way. Neither of them mentioned Evelyn, as if she had already vanished from the house. She was less relevant than a nursing chair, less important than a bookshelf. At that moment, sitting on the couch that would soon be replaced by nursery furniture, Evelyn had a revelation that changed everything. She realized she had spent her entire life being defined by others, first as a wife, then as a mother, now as dead weight. She had never simply been Evelyn, a person with value in her own right. The divorce had taken her identity as a wife. Daniel was stripping away her identity as a mother, but maybe it was time to discover who Evelyn Mitchell was when she wasn't serving anyone else. Daniel and Rebecca's coldness revealed something Evelyn had resisted accepting. Some people can discard even those they loved most when those people become inconvenient. That night, for the first time in months, Evelyn didn't cry on the couch. Instead, she made plans. The universe, as she would soon discover, was already conspiring in her favor in a way she could never have imagined. Sometimes fate disguises itself as coincidence, and the most important moments of our lives arrive when we least expect them. For Evelyn Mitchell, that moment came on a rainy Thursday when she decided to walk to Mr. Singh's small market to buy a few basics. She didn't have a crore more loss from the divorce and depended on walks or on Daniel's goodwill to get around. The little store was 6 blocks away, and the light rain made the walk even more unpleasant, but Evelyn preferred braving the bad weather to spending more time than necessary in that cold house. In her old purse she carried just $23, the only money she had left in the world. Mr. Singh had always been kind to Evelyn, treating her with the courtesy she had forgotten she deserved. Born in India, he understood what it meant to start over in a strange land, and perhaps that's why he showed more compassion for those struggling. "How are you today, Mrs. Mitchell?" he asked with his warm accent as she placed a few basics on the counter: bread, milk, eggs, simple things that wouldn't bother Rebecca in the shared fridge. Evelyn gave a tired smile. "Surviving, Mr. Singh. Just surviving." He nodded with understanding, his eyes drifting to the lottery machine in the corner. "You know," Mr. Singh said, following her gaze, "my wife always says that when life is hard, the universe sometimes prepares surprises." He chuckled affectionately. "Of course, I always reply that hard work is more reliable than luck," but he paused, looking at Evelyn with a strangely serious expression. "But sometimes I feel certain people deserve for luck to find them." There was something in the way he said it that felt almost prophetic. The lottery machine kept flashing its hypnotic lights, and for the first time in months, Evelyn felt an inexplicable urge to do something completely irrational. The total came to $17.50, leaving her with only $5.50. Money she had planned to keep for emergencies, though she didn't know what emergency could be bigger than her current situation. For a moment, she considered how senseless her thought was. Buying a lottery ticket with money she barely had was exactly the kind of irresponsible decision desperate people make. But then she remembered Daniel's cruel words about the nursing home, the talk about the baby's room. If she was going to end up in an institution anyway, what difference would $5 more or less make? "Mr. Singh," she said, surprised by the firmness in her own voice, "I'd like to buy a lottery ticket." He looked at her with a mix of surprise and something that seemed almost like pride. "Are you sure, Mrs. Mitchell?" Evelyn nodded, and for the first time in months she felt she was making a decision of her own free will. It was a tiny act of independence, almost pathetic, but it was hers. Mr. Singh pulled a ticket from the machine. "This one looks special." The ticket was colorful, full of small numbers and symbols promising impossible fortunes. Evelyn folded it carefully and tucked it into her wallet, along with the single $1.50 she had left. As she walked back home in the rain, she wondered whether she had just done the stupidest thing of her life or whether, in some mysterious way, she had just bought her freedom. There are nights that split our lives into before and after, and for Evelyn Mitchell, that night came exactly 72 hours after her visit to Mr. Singh's store. She was lying on the familiar couch, listening to Daniel and Rebecca talk about paint for the baby's room, when she decided to check the lottery numbers on her old, barely functioning phone. She expected nothing. In fact, she had almost forgotten the folded ticket in her worn wallet. It was more out of boredom than hope that she typed the numbers into the official site. The first number matched. Coincidence, she thought. The second matched too. When she reached the 6th and final number, Evelyn had to check 3 times. Every number matched perfectly. $3 million. The shock was so great she was paralyzed for several minutes, staring at the phone screen as if the numbers would disappear if she blinked. $3 million. The amount was so absurd compared to her current reality it felt like a joke of fate. Days ago, she had only $23 to her name and was being pressured to go to a nursing home. Now she had enough money to buy her own home, her independence, her dignity. But along with the euphoria came a strategic clarity that surprised her. For the first time in months, Evelyn felt she had real power, and she needed to use it wisely. Her first decision was to keep absolute secrecy. Daniel and Rebecca had made it very clear who they were when she had nothing. Now she wanted to see how they would behave while still thinking she was just a financial burden. It was a kind of silent justice, a final character test they didn't know they were taking. Over the next few days, Evelyn would go on being the inconvenient mother-in-law on the couch, but now every cruel word, every look of contempt, would be carefully recorded in her memory. The secret wealth gave her a completely new perspective on everything happening. The following days were surreal. Evelyn kept her routine of forced invisibility, but now with a secret smile that Daniel and Rebecca mistook for pathetic resignation. When Rebecca remarked sarcastically, "At least now you seem more resigned," Evelyn simply nodded, knowing that very soon it would be Rebecca who would need to resign herself to a completely new situation. She used the time to research, discreetly, rural properties, animal shelters, investment possibilities. Every search on the old phone was a step toward a future she was building in secret. Daniel kept casually bringing up the nursing home, sometimes even bringing brochures. "Mom, that place in Riverside looks really nice," he'd say, showing photos of tiny rooms. Evelyn looked at the brochures with feigned interest, nodding as if she were truly considering the option, while mentally calculating how many places like that she could buy with her $3 million. The irony of the situation was delicious. Daniel was trying to persuade her to accept institutional charity while she had enough money to buy the entire institution. The hard work of quietly planning her new life filled Evelyn's thoughts. Finally, after 2 weeks of secret planning, Evelyn was ready to take the first public step toward her new life. Sometimes justice takes time to arrive, but when it comes, it brings opportunities for redemption that transform not only our life but also the lives of those around us. True freedom begins when we stop asking permission to dream. 3 weeks after discovering she had won the lottery, Evelyn Mitchell finally took the first concrete step toward her independence. She told Daniel she was going out to take care of some personal half-truth that visibly relieved him. In reality, Evelyn was on her way to a rural property she had found online: 40 acres of land with a main house, an old barn, and a small guest cabin. It was perfect for her secret plans. The main house was simple but solid, with 3 bedrooms and a large kitchen overlooking the fields. The barn could easily be converted to house rescued animals. The purchase was surprisingly simple when you have $3 million in the bank. The real estate agent, initially skeptical of an older woman's ability to pay without companions, quickly changed his attitude when Evelyn presented bank statements. "Cash, no financing," she said with a calm that surprised her. It was the first time in decades she'd made a major financial decision without consulting anyone. The property cost $800,000, a sum that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier but now represented only a fraction of her new wealth. The next step was finding someone to help her. Evelyn placed an ad for an assistant with experience in animal care, and that's how she met Chloe Adams, a 28-year-old who had worked in zoos and sanctuaries. During their interview at a cafe in town, Evelyn realized Chloe not only had the technical experience needed but also a genuine passion for animals. "I want to build a place where abandoned animals can have a second chance," Evelyn explained. "That's exactly the kind of work I've always dreamed of doing," Chloe replied. It was a perfect partnership. The transformation of the property began immediately. Chloe moved into the main house with Evelyn, and together they planned every detail of the sanctuary. The barn was renovated with individual stalls for rescued horses, a section for goats and sheep, and basic veterinary facilities. They built secure fences, installed water systems, and created rotational grazing areas. Evelyn discovered she had a natural talent for administration, while Chloe handled the technical aspects. The hard physical work was therapeutic. Every fence they built was a declaration of her new independence. The first animals arrived within a month: 2 elderly horses saved from neglect, 3 goats rescued from an abandoned farm, and a blind sheep that no one else wanted. Each rescue was a personal mission for Evelyn. She saw in these abandoned animals a reflection of her own experience, beings who had been discarded when they were no longer convenient. The humility she showed in the work was genuine. Despite her new wealth, she never hesitated to clean stables, carry hay, or administer medicine. The transformation of Evelyn Mitchell was complete, but the lesson she would teach was only beginning. The universe has a peculiar way of balancing the scales. 6 months after Evelyn had vanished mysteriously, the couple's life began to collapse in spectacular fashion. It all started when Daniel lost his job in a mass layoff at the company where he had worked for 8 years. "We're cutting 40 of the staff, Daniel. It's nothing personal. But for someone with a high mortgage, a baby on the way, and a wife who had stopped working, it was definitely personal. The irony was cruel at the exact moment when they thought they would finally have the perfect house, free from the inconvenient mother-in-law. The money to maintain that house had disappeared. The debts began piling up at a frightening speed. The mortgage, which consumed 60 of Daniel's salary, became impossible to pay with only unemployment benefits. Rebecca, 6 months pregnant, tried to find work, but discovered that few companies are willing to hire women visibly pregnant. The credit cards hit their maximum limit, basic bills began to fall behind, and the financial pressure brought tensions into the relationship they never even knew existed. The house that had once been the stage of Evelyn's humiliation now became a source of constant stress. Every letter from the bank was a foreclosure threat, every collection call a reminder they were losing control. The baby's room, which they had planned so enthusiastically, remained half-decorated because they had no money to finish it. Maybe we should have thought better before Daniel began one night, but couldn't finish the sentence. Before what? Before treating his mother as a burden? Desperation led them to increasingly desperate decisions. They sold the newer car and kept only an old vehicle that broke down constantly. They cancelled cable TV, the premium internet plan, the streaming subscriptions. Rebecca tried selling some clothes online, but the prices were ridiculous compared to the debts piling up. Daniel signed up for temporary jobs, accepting delivery and cleaning services he would once have considered beneath his qualifications. It was during one of those sleepless nights that Daniel remembered his mother. "Rebecca, do you think we should try to find my mom?" "Rebecca, 8 months pregnant and exhausted Daniel, your mother probably doesn't even want to talk to us after how we treated her." It was the first time they openly admitted that they had treated Evelyn badly. The search began with calls to local nursing homes, but none had an Evelyn Mitchell registered. Daniel was confused. Where had his mother gone? Finally, one Tuesday afternoon, he received an unexpected call. It was a number he didn't recognize, but the voice was unmistakably familiar. "Hello, Daniel. This is your mother. I heard you've been going through some difficulties." How she had found out about their problems was a mystery, but the relief Daniel felt was immense. "Mom, we were looking for you. Where are you?" Her answer would be the beginning of a lesson in humility that would change their lives forever. There are moments in life when power changes hands, and those who were once beneath suddenly find themselves in a position to dictate the rules. When Daniel and Rebecca arrived at Evelyn's rural property, with their few belongings in the old car and Rebecca visibly pregnant, they could hardly believe what they saw. The transformation of the woman they had treated as a burden was striking. Evelyn welcomed them on the porch of the main house, dressed in simple but quality clothes, surrounded by rescued animals. "So," she said with a calmness Daniel couldn't remember seeing before, "you need a place to stay. Justice sometimes takes time to arrive, but when it does, it carries an almost poetic symmetry." Evelyn pointed to the small guest cabin on the other side of the property. "You can stay there," she said simply. Daniel looked at the modest building: 2 small bedrooms, a basic kitchen, a tiny bathroom. It was clean and functional, but light years away from the comfort they had lost. "Mom, this is very generous," Daniel stammered, clearly hoping to be invited into the main house. Evelyn smiled. "It's what I have available. Of course, there are some property rules that must be followed." The word rules carried a special weight, echoing all the unspoken rules they had once imposed on her. Evelyn's rules were simple, but firm. Daniel would need to work on the property, taking care of the animals, maintaining the facilities, making necessary repairs. "Hard work builds character," she explained. Rebecca, despite her advanced pregnancy, could help with administrative tasks, keeping records of the animals, organizing the sanctuary's finances. "Everyone here contributes according to their abilities," Evelyn continued. "There is no place for anyone unwilling to make an effort." The silent humiliation on Daniel's face was palpable. He was experiencing exactly what he had once imposed on his mother. Daniel's first day of work was revealing. Waking at 5 in the morning to feed animals, clean stables, haul hay, this was all new to a man who had spent years behind a desk. His muscles ached, his hands blistered, and he discovered that physical labor is far more exhausting than he had imagined. Evelyn supervised him with patience, but also with firmness. Each instruction was delivered with the same respectful yet authoritative tone Daniel had once used when laying out house rules for her. The nights in the cabin were long and filled with painful reflections. Daniel and Rebecca were forced to confront the reality of how they had treated Evelyn. The contrast was striking. While they had made Evelyn feel like a burden, she was treating them as family in need of help, but also family that needed to learn responsibility. "She could have left us on the street," Rebecca murmured one night. "Why is she helping us?" Daniel knew the answer: because Evelyn was a better person than they had been. Babies have a unique power to transform family dynamics, and William Mitchell Jr., affectionately called Billy, was no exception. He arrived in the early hours of September, 3 weeks earlier than expected, when Rebecca began experiencing strong contractions in the small cabin. Daniel woke in panic, but it was Evelyn who took control of the situation with the calm of someone who had been through it before. "Call the ambulance," she instructed as she helped Rebecca get dressed. "I'll go with you to the hospital." During the entire rush to the hospital, Evelyn held Rebecca's hand, offering words of encouragement. "You'll do just fine, dear. You are stronger than you think." It was the first time Rebecca had heard Evelyn call her dear. The delivery was quick but intense, and when Billy finally entered the world, crying strong and healthy, there was a reverent silence in the room. Evelyn looked at her grandson, her first grandchild, and felt something she hadn't expected: automatic forgiveness. All the hurts, all the humiliations seemed to shrink before that innocent child. "He's perfect," she whispered, tears in her eyes. Daniel, holding his son for the first time, looked at his mother with gratitude that went far beyond immediate circumstances. "Mom, I thank you for being here. For everything." It was the beginning of a reconciliation that everyone knew would be necessary. Back at the property, Billy's arrival changed everything. Evelyn transformed one of the rooms in the main house into a suite for Rebecca and the baby, insisting that a new mother needed comfort and proximity to experienced help. "The cabin isn't fit for a newborn," she said simply. Evelyn's generosity was constant, but never framed as a favorite, was presented as what any grandmother would naturally do. She rose during the night to help with feedings, prepared nourishing meals for Rebecca, and gradually took on many of the tasks that allowed the couple to rest. Chloe Adams proved to be an unexpected addition to the family dynamic. Only 28 years old, she quickly became like a younger sister to Rebecca and a devoted aunt to Billy. "I always wanted siblings," Chloe confessed one afternoon, holding Billy. "Now I feel like I finally have a real family." Evelyn watched these interactions with quiet satisfaction. She had created not only a sanctuary for animals, but a true home where people in need of second chances could find mutual support. Billy became the gravitational center that unexpectedly united the family. During nighttime feedings, Evelyn and Rebecca whispered about motherhood, exchanging experiences and advice. The baptism was celebrated right on the property, in a simple yet meaningful ceremony in the garden overlooking the fields where rescued animals grazed peacefully. "May this child grow up knowing the value of compassion," said the local pastor. Billy's presence also brought a new perspective on family and legacy, and Evelyn began speaking of the sanctuary's future as something that could grow through the generations. True transformation does not happen overnight, it is built slowly, like a mosaic formed by thousands of small gestures, daily choices, and silent sacrifices. Each decision between pride and humility opens a new crack for change. For Daniel Mitchell, this transformation began unexpectedly, in the cold dawns of October, when darkness still covered the fields and only the distant sound of animals broke the silence. He, once proud of never needing to rise early, now awoke before sunrise to care for the rescues of the sanctuary. There was something purifying in that cold that cut the skin, something that reminded him the world did not revolve around his will, but around the lives that depended on his hands. It was 6 months of daily physical work, 6 months of sweat soaking the earth, of effort that shaped not only his muscles but his entire vision of the world. The man who had once lived hunched over a computer screen now discovered the firmness of an upright posture, the confidence born of honest, well-done work. His hands, once soft and smooth, had become calloused, each line holding the story of a task completed. His shoulders, once heavy with mental fatigue, now carried the real weight of feed sacks, water buckets, and tangible responsibilities. One morning, while feeding the horses, Daniel looked at his mother and let out a timid smile. "You know, Mom," he said, his voice trembling, "I never understood before why you loved caring for others so much. Now I do. There's something that fills you, something that gives meaning." While Daniel discovered himself in physical effort, Rebecca lived her own silent revolution, perhaps less visible but equally profound. The administrative work at the sanctuary, which she initially treated only as an obligation, revealed talents she hadn't realized she possessed. She discovered in herself a surprising analytical mind, a natural ability to handle numbers, strategies, and plans. Among spreadsheets and reports, an unexpected enthusiasm was born: the desire to build something larger, solid, and sustainable. That was how she structured a detailed expansion plan, which included partnerships with local veterinarians, educational programs to bring children closer to animal care, and even the possibility of certification as an animal-assisted therapy center. On a rainy afternoon, Rebecca presented Evelyn with a carefully organized spreadsheet, complete with projections for the next 2 years. "Evelyn," she said firmly and respectfully, "I believe we can double our capacity in a short time if we follow this path." It was the first time she called her mother-in-law by her first name, a sign that the barrier of formality and distrust was beginning to dissolve. Evelyn, who listened in silence, realized at that moment that something had truly changed. Rebecca's organizational intelligence impressed even Chloe, the most skeptical member of the family. "She has long-term vision," Chloe commented privately to Evelyn. "And, most importantly, she's not doing it just to prove herself. She truly cares. You can feel it." Those words echoed in Evelyn's heart, who began to see Rebecca in a new light. The initial coldness that had once troubled her had been replaced by genuine compassion. The rush and impatience had given way to patient dedication. When she saw Rebecca holding Billy with tenderness while checking the condition of an injured colt, Evelyn no longer saw only a daughter-in-law, she saw a woman who had understood the essence of care, someone who taught her son, through example, that life is sustained by the act of caring. The decisive moment arrived one December afternoon. Daniel found his mother sitting alone on the porch, her gaze lost over the fields that now sheltered more than 20 rescued animals. He approached silently, sat beside her, and took a long moment before speaking. "Mom," he began, his voice heavy with emotion, "I need to apologize. Not just for the last words I said, but for the years when I didn't value everything you did for us. I treated you like a burden, when in truth you were always the anchor that kept us steady. I don't know how you could ever forgive me." There was a silence that felt eternal, until Evelyn drew a deep breath and answered with serenity, "Daniel, forgiveness isn't something that happens all at once. It is built, step by step, through consistent actions. You both are rebuilding it every day, and that's what matters." Redemption solidified months later, when Daniel and Rebecca organized the celebration of the sanctuary's first anniversary. It was a simple event, but full of meaning. Neighbors, partners, volunteers, and children filled the space with joy. The air was thick with hope. When Daniel stood up to speak, his firm, emotional voice cut through the noise. "This place exists because my mother believed every life deserves a second chance," he declared. "She gave that chance to us too, and we are grateful every single day." Evelyn, moved, felt tears run down her face. Those words were more than a speech, they were the public validation of everything she had dreamed her son and daughter-in-law would learn. There, under applause and smiles, she understood their transformation was not temporary but a new way of living. There are moments in life when we are forced to draw invisible yet definitive lines that determine how our relationships will be sustained from that point on. Silent milestones that become guiding lights for the future. For Evelyn Mitchell, that moment came on a sunny January morning, exactly 1 year after the unexpected lottery prize that had changed her path. The sun streamed through the main farmhouse windows, casting golden beams across the heavy wooden table, witness to so many conversations loaded with pain and reconciliation. There, She gathered Daniel, Rebecca, and Chloe. Billy, sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms, breathed softly, reminding them all there was a future to be built. Evelyn drew a deep breath, looked each one in the eye, and spoke the words that would forever change the family's dynamic. I accept you back as my true family. You have proven, not through empty promises or speeches, but through daily actions, that you have learned the true meaning of respect and gratitude. The silence that followed was so dense it seemed to fill every corner of the kitchen. The three remained still, feeling the weight of each syllable spoken. Evelyn continued, her voice firm yet tender. But I want you to understand something with absolute clarity. Love only has value when it walks hand in hand with respect. If I am ever treated as invisible again, know that there will be no third chances. These words were not spoken as a threat, but as the solemn declaration of someone who had already experienced the depths of emotional pain and had decided never to allow it again. It was then that, almost as if revealing a long-kept secret, Evelyn brought to light the truth about the origin of her wealth. I imagine you've wondered how I managed to buy this property, haven't you? She smiled with an enigmatic calm as she poured hot coffee into porcelain cups. I won $3 million in the lottery. 3 days after Daniel suggested I go to a nursing home. The words fell on the table like a stone dropped into a lake. The silence was deafening. Daniel and Rebecca looked at each other, unable to hide their shock. Slowly, they began to grasp the dimension of what that meant. Evelyn could have done anything, vanished from their lives, lived in luxury, used the money to feed bitterness or to take cruel revenge. But she hadn't. She had chosen another path, the hardest, the noblest. She had chosen to transform that wealth into a greater purpose, into something that not only rescued animals, but gave her own children the chance to rescue themselves as human beings. I could have bought a mansion and lived alone, surrounded by comfort and silence, Evelyn continued, staring at the cup as if she saw reflections of her past. But I discovered that wealth without purpose is nothing but emptiness. And I learned, at the cost of deep pain, that family only has value when it is true. Not blood, not convenience, but truth. Rebecca, overwhelmed with emotion, was the first to find words. Evelyn, we did not deserve your generosity. After everything we did, after the way we treated you. Before she could finish, Evelyn gently raised her hand, interrupting her. My dear, deserving was never the question. The only question was whether you would be able to learn and grow. And you have proven, day after day, that you could. Daniel, his voice trembling, nodded and added. Mom, you gave us a lesson we will carry forever. About humility, about the value of hard work, about never taking people's love for granted. You gave us back something we didn't even know we had lost awareness. Then Evelyn revealed the true reach of her plan, something far beyond simple family reconciliation. This property is no longer just mine, she explained, with the serenity of someone thinking about future generations. It now belongs to a foundation I created. Daniel and Rebecca will be co-directors, Chloe will be the technical director, and Billy, when he grows, will be the final beneficiary, but only if he demonstrates the same values you've learned here. Chloe, stunned, listened to the next announcement with tears in her eyes. And you, Chloe, will be my official partner in the sanctuary, with equal participation. Because you showed me that family is not determined by blood, but by loyalty, by dedication, and by shared values. Tears rolled quietly, and for the first time, they all felt united not by obligation, but by conscious choice. Evelyn's final rules were simple in words, but unbreakable in essence. In this family, we treat every being with dignity. We always work for the common good, never only for self-interest. And under no circumstance will anyone ever again be considered disposable just because they became inconvenient. The farm was no longer just a piece of land. It became a living symbol that it is never too late to rebuild relationships as long as there is genuine will to change, courage to admit mistakes, and the firm decision to walk together. And so, the sanctuary became not only a shelter for animals, but the beating heart of a family reborn from its own ashes. Viewers, ask yourselves now how many of us are living exactly as Evelyn once lived on that couch, feeling reduced, erased, as if we were nothing more than a burden in someone else's life? How many of us accept being treated as invisible, silenced, when deep inside we know our true worth? And how many of us, perhaps without realizing, treat others in the same way, assuming they'll always be there, waiting endlessly for the moment we finally decide to recognize their importance? Evelyn's story reminds us that true wealth does not lie in the $3 million she won, but in the courage to transform that money into a tool for change. She could have chosen the easy path, buying a life of luxury and closing the door to everyone who hurt her. She could have taken revenge, leaving Daniel and Rebecca to face alone the weight of their wrong choices. But no, Evelyn chose the infinitely harder road, the road of second chances. But not a second chance without conditions. One that demanded genuine transformation, consistent actions, and a real commitment not to repeat the mistakes of the past. Now, think about your own life. Who is your Evelyn? Is there someone you've been treating as guaranteed, as if their presence were an automatic right instead of a precious gift? Is there someone who has been offering you care, patience, or love, but you have not truly acknowledged it? Or perhaps you are the one living on the other side of this equation, accepting crumbs of attention, broken pieces of respect, when in reality you deserve a full banquet of dignity and recognition. This reflection brings us to the deepest lesson: it's not about money, and it's not about the lottery. The most powerful message is about the moment we stop asking permission to be respected and begin demanding what we should have always received: dignity. It's about understanding that true love never walks alone, it always comes hand in hand with respect. It's about realizing that real family is not sustained by blood ties, but by ties of commitment, of care, of daily actions repeated over and over again. Evelyn teaches us that it is never too late to rebuild. Never too late to set new rules for living together, to redefine boundaries, and to transform humiliation into strength. But she also warns us of something crucial: second chances are precious because they are rare. They should never be wasted. They should never be treated as guaranteed. They are unique invitations to prove, through actions, that we are capable of evolving. So let me ask you directly: what changes do you need to make now, without further delay? Which relationships deserve to be revisited under the light of respect? Which situations must you close to create space for something better? And above all, which small, daily actions can you start taking today to transform your reality? Never underestimate the power of a repeated gesture, of a word spoken at the right time, or of a firm decision taken in silence. Sometimes, it is precisely those small choices that free us from the chains of invisibility. Remember, you have far more power than you imagine. The power to transform yourself, to redesign your story, to choose whether to remain on the couch of indifference or to rise and claim the place you deserve. The power to say enough when respect is denied, and the power to say yes when the opportunity to begin again appears. And if Evelyn's story touched your heart, if you felt, even for a moment, that it spoke directly to your own life, don't let this feeling pass in silence. Subscribe to our channel, activate the notifications, and share this message with someone who needs to hear it today. Here, we bring you real, inspiring stories of resilience, family, dignity, and second chances, because every one of us deserves respect, and every one of us deserves the chance to write a better ending to our own story. So tell me in the comments, what part of Evelyn's journey touched you the most? And what change will you start making today in your own life?